Rain is getting his EX job early in Global. And so that comes with some implications. In JP, when he was released after, I believe, Charlotte and Warrior of Light EX. So there were other tanks that had a pretty good ability to tank magical damage. But right now, he's still our best magic tank, even without his EX. So let's dive into what he gets and whether it's worth investing into him, or if you're better just spending your resources elsewhere. The first aspect of EXing a unit is getting more stats, and in that regards, I think Rain is served pretty well. He gains about 1800 more HP, putting him in the top tier, definitely, at almost 5400. He gets quite a bit more magic as well. 411 is on the low end for a magic-based 120 unit. But he's a tank, he's not there to do damage, and it will still be enough to give him relevant damage while not being top tier. I'm thinking you can probably expect similar damage from Rain as you can from King Mont. So when they're built for damage, they'll do something relevant. Outside of that, they'll hit hard-ish and poke the enemy team down slowly, but they won't be your damage carry. He then gets some luck, which is useful for accuracy. 33 luck is about 15 or so accuracy, so it's going to help him miss a little bit less often. He gets a bit of attack, which is fun for some of his shenanigans, but usually you don't use his knight abilities that much, so I don't think they'll see much play. And then some dexterity influences his crit rate, so meh, not bad. He also gets 2 more points of agility, which is fun, but it's definitely not game-changing. Rain's main strength remains the same even with those stats gained, and these strengths are 2 things. His innate super high spirit at 23. He is by far the character with the most spirit right now, and that's why he's the only, I would say, dedicated spirit tank in the game at the current time. He also has some pretty decent ice resistance, so with the Ifrit Vision card, he can go really high in that department. So these are the 2 strengths that he's really leveraging, and he keeps doing those very well. Now, I've heard a lot of criticism about his new abilities, but personally, I'm a big fan of those. First of all, his passive, okay, maybe not terrible, but he gains 15 AoE resistance, which is going to be great in a lot of scenarios. Quite often, your tank takes hits along with the rest of your team, so that just means that he's going to take that much less damage. It's good, but it's nothing game-changing. His second upgrade, though, makes it so that his Firaga is instantaneous and has a chance to slow. Now, a lot of units get those status effects that land only once in a while. Rain is a high faith unit, so his chance of inflicting slow will actually be pretty high, which is great, right? If the guy in front of your team can slow the enemy team, that protects your backline even more. And then to go into deeper, even deeper into that archetype, he gains access to a new ability at level 120 that is a AoE slash attack, so that's the first one in his kit. That decreases movement for everybody, and that's guaranteed to happen. So you now get a tank that can reduce movement for the enemy team, slow the enemy team, and just kite really well for the rest of your team. The AI might not be the best at leveraging that because, you know, your guys are all going to rush at the enemy team anyways and then fight to the death. But in any kind of manual play, either PvE or PvP, you can really leverage that to your advantage. Push Rain forward, slow the enemy team, and then use ranged attackers in the back potentially and just kiting the enemy team with them. So I think those abilities have a lot of value in more strategic kind of play. Now, let's talk about some comparisons. Right now, if you have King Mont, you might not need Rain, right? Rain is a much better magic tank, but King Mont is better at pretty much everything else. RNJ, on his review of EX Rain, has done a great comparison between Rain and King Mont, so I won't cover that, but I will put the link to his video in the description. So if you want to see that and hear that, definitely go check it out. Otherwise, there are some other options that will be released in the future that are also good alternatives to Rain. The first one is Charlotte. She's going to be released in a short while, and she's another spirit-oriented tank, so she's really the same archetype as Rain. The main difference is Charlotte is going to be much faster, and then she's a physical-based unit, so she will be using physical attacks. And then while Rain is more of a debuffer, Charlotte is more about providing good buffs to your own team. She has some great debuffs as well, but she has a more of a supportive side, while Rain is more of a debilitating character. So they each have their specialty, but that's going to be it in a nutshell. And then, well, Rain is weak against water, while Charlotte is strong against water, so they're not necessarily designed to fight the same enemies. Another good option though, if you have Warrior of Light already at level 99 and you're waiting for his EX job, he can do a really good job at tanking magic. Since he has the Spellblade sub-job, he can get a really high magic resistance. Now, that's not exactly the same as being a spirit tank, but right now there are pretty few mages with abilities that scale off magic and are not magic, right? We have the Rune Knights and Spellblade with some slash attacks. Warrior of Light doesn't really care about that. He has a pretty good slash resistance. Then we have Garvel with magic-based missile attacks. Again, Warrior of Light has a pretty good missile resistance. So the only character that's really going to be a major magic threat if you're building him to fight mages is going to be Luelle with her magic-based strike attack, because in that regards, Warrior of Light isn't all that tanky, but he still has a ton of HP and pretty good spirit, so I would say overall, he's a good alternative to Rain. And then all three of these characters have abilities that grant them hate, which is why they're such great tanks. Now, I did think of a couple team comps that I think would be really fun to use with Rain, especially in his EX job. The first one is the one I talked about a little bit earlier, so you would pair him with a bunch of long-range ranged attackers. The main weakness of ranged attackers is that they're squishy. So usually they're going to get an advantage early in the fight, and then when the enemy finally reaches them, they're just going to die. But if you have a good tank in front that can grab aggro and then keep the enemy away from your ranged attackers for a while, you'll win the fight. What Rain does is he can tank for a while, and then on top of that, he can slow the enemy team's movement, so they have even less chance of reaching your backline. So I think that combination would be pretty interesting. Then he has crazy high HP. So what do you want with super high HP characters? Well, you want full life and you want a ton of healing. So I think pairing him with Yuna or Ayaka or any dedicated healer would work really well. And then when you're running a tank like this, a hate tank, you run the risk of your damage dealer getting hit by AoE attacks once in a while. So using a character like Gilgamesh, who can have a barrier on himself and then reduce incoming damage when AoE attacks do hit them, will make it so that you don't lose the rest of your guys and your healers can focus on your tank, keeping him alive. What makes Rain work better than a lot of other tanks in this composition is that he's one of the only tanks in the game that you want to run with high spirit, because he also scales everything he does off of magic-based abilities. So your other tanks, you usually run them at 50 or even 30 faith, but for Rain, he's at 97 faith, so healing works very well on him. And then he works really well in a fire affinity team. While Rain himself doesn't have a master ability that increases fire units, he has a limit break that reduces fire resistance, and he can build fire/chains. So he's a natural partner for King Mont. You're going to have a super tanky frontline. You can reduce slash resistance, reduce fire resistance, and just deal insane damage. And then on top of that, I would use a ranged attacker ideally that's not going to put themselves in danger and that's going to have bells. So they can use bells and then rain damage on the enemy team. Winter Marchery is a very good character for this because of the barrage. That's a wide AoE. But Luartha is also pretty incredible. If you've seen my showcase of her, which I'll link in the description, she can one-shot EX units in the right setup. So she's very impressive, and she would be a great partner to just kind of stay in the back and then deal a lot of damage while you have two crazy tanks in front. So I think that team would also work pretty well. So should you build him? Well, he's got a pretty unique role right now. I think if you play him manually, he's going to have great strategic value. He's not time limited, and he'll be coming with a unique VC. I don't want to talk about the VC too much. We don't know the stats yet, so it's not really worth talking about a lot, but he will have something to make him even stronger. So I think players should plan their accounts around him eventually as being a great addition to their team. But I don't think there's any kind of rush to get him. Don't go ahead buying packs or spending money just to get his shards. You will have opportunities to pull his shards naturally as you go for other units. So I don't think there's any kind of rush. He's not necessary for any kind of content, and especially if you have King Mont. You already have a very versatile, very powerful tank. King Mont can somewhat fight magic characters. Yes, he does it less well than Rain would, but in most scenarios, you would prefer King Mont as a tank over Rain, so you definitely don't need him in those scenarios. So that was it, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it and learned a thing or two. If you did, please like and subscribe. It will make it more likely that you see my content. And then as always, thanks so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.